All right. And we are picking up the Cloud of Unknowing, this treatise on one of the practices of Bhakti Yoga, used by a Bhakti tradition, a Bhakti Yoga tradition, also known as Christianity. And it's part of the practice kind of teaching us from that perspective how to do, what would you call it, mantra dhyan? Chanting the names of God. And in an effort really to become aware of that divine principle within ourselves, because initially, we're saying the name of God, and so we're thinking outside of ourselves initially when we start this thing, but as part of that process of repeating the name of God, which continually manifests the form, you come to realize that that form, which is pure love, is manifesting within you. And that it's not separate from you. And so slowly, God becomes interior. And then slowly, you go through all three of the stages, where at first God is separate and you are yourself and God is God. And then as you grow, you become a part of God and God is the whole. And then in the final stage, you and God are one. There's no separation between you. And the important thing is that through practice, this becomes truth. Through practice, we begin to see these things, because it's through practice that we basically diminish our own egoism through an understanding of who we are, of what we are. Hello, Anna. Good to see you. And Marie, I think I saw you come in there too. I'd just like to say hi to everybody. Oh my gosh.
Swami, good evening, everyone. Good to see you, Swami.
Good to see you too. Marvelous. Now, let me see here. I'm going to pin my picture here, try to remember. All right. So we're on chapter, we're on page 203. I think we're on chapter 44, XLIV. I only know the numbers up to like 10. So
Yeah.
in Roman script, when they threw the L in there at 40, it's kind of thrown me for a loop. All right. So chapter 44, I think, page 203. How the soul must dispose itself to suppress all awareness and experience of its own being. Do you understand what he's saying there? How the soul must dispose itself to suppress all awareness and experience of its own being. Do you know why that would be true? Because that awareness of its own being is where it's collecting the attributes to be a thought of itself, right? But when you become aware of yourself as a third party, it's building ego, right? You're collecting attributes to describe yourself, right? And so whenever we are seeing ourselves from a third party, thinking about ourselves as a third party, watching ourselves as a third party, we're collecting attributes to describe ourselves, and that is basically the ego fortifying its little nest of attributes that it keeps in the mind as thoughts of itself, living as our lower nature, our lower self, right? Defined by body, mind, and their needs and appetites. And through this chanting of the name of God, we become aware of God within. When you speak the name of God in your mind during your mantra practice, you can't say the name of something without evoking its form, right? If I say milk, immediately you see the whiteness of milk. If I say fire, you feel its power to burn. These things are linked and cannot be separated. And so as you chant the name of God within, slowly over time, depending on your earnestness and sincerity of it, your mind loses or diminishes its sense of separateness, its sense of me and mine, because the love that's being invoked by the name you come to know to be within you. Right? At first, when you're just chanting the name, you're in your head, because we all start in our head, chanting the names of God, and you have a feeling of God being external. And so you feel like you're chanting the name of God and that it's connecting you with something external to yourself. And that delusion stays or stays for a long time. But as that sense of love increases, it becomes undeniable that when you chant the name, what is manifesting is here within yourself, this sense of love, this feeling of this beautiful warmth, this beautiful unity, right? And so we move from God being separate from us, we move then into God, ourself being a part of God. God is the whole and we are the part, right? And then if you keep doing the practice and you keep going deeper, you keep diminishing that sense of ego, which is what separates you from the divine, you come to know in the very end, the last thing you say is, we are one, right? That God and I are not separate. As soon as the ego was annihilated, God and I took on the same will, pure love, pure wisdom, manifesting through being, right? In that sense. So for it to manifest continually through being, though, we do have to keep a smidge of me and mine in order to hold on to a body, right? In that sense. All right, so how the soul must dispose itself to suppress all awareness and experience of its own being, right? And so we don't, when you think of yourself, when you separate yourself and think about yourself, you basically become two, right? That's a duality because somebody has to be the observer of you and then something is you. And so he's saying for us to come to this unity, we have to really stay in the present and stay in the oneness. Don't suppress anything that is an experience of your own being, right? Something that belongs to you. But you don't want to talk about that because that enforces the idea of you as a separate thing. And that's what he's trying to get us around. So he says, next, you will ask me how you can destroy this simple awareness and experience of your own being. For doubtless it seems to you that once it is destroyed, all other hindrances will be destroyed as well. If this is what you think, you are certainly right. My answer to you is this. Without a very special grace, which God gives out of his absolute bounty, and along with it a corresponding capacity on your part for receiving this grace, this simple awareness and experience of your being can in no way be destroyed. This capacity is nothing else but a strong and profound spiritual sorrow. Right? And he's got a footnote here. The author's own exegesis of his translation of the Latin rendering of Forti Contritione of the mystical theology of the pseudo-Deist with an intense, intelligent, and loving contrition. All right, I shouldn't even have read that. That was an academic reference, which I don't remember my Latin. Yes, so let's take a look at this interesting here. Again, this capacity, right? The capacity on your part for receiving his grace, this simple awareness and experience of your own being can in no way be destroyed. Yeah, so everything, all of your hindrances will be destroyed as soon as you overcome this sense of separateness, where you are aware of your own self as an observable part of yourself, right? So you're seeing yourself as real, but interestingly enough, observing yourself at the same time. And so he's saying it's only through great grace, you know, that all of this will fall away. The capacity is nothing else but a strong and profound spiritual sorrow. With regard to this sorrow, you need to have this particular discretion. You must take care while you have the sorrow not to put too great a strain on your body or your spirit, but to keep very still as though you were asleep, all worn out and sunk deep in this sorrow. Here is true sorrow. Here is perfect sorrow. He is fortunate indeed who can come to this sorrow. All men have reason for the sorrow, but he who knows and feels that he exists has a very special experience of sorrow. Right? So he's talking about this wound, you know, in the words of St. John of the Cross, this idea of if you see yourself as separate, if you are aware of yourself as an entity with attributes, right, then you know yourself or you assume yourself to be independent and separate from God. And to someone who has had no experience of union with God or no experience of that intimacy with God, we think, oh, okay, well, that's no big deal, right? But for someone who has touched or tasted an experience with God or a manifestation of God or presence or however you want to talk about it, that idea of separateness is a wound. It's a terrible sorrow, right? Because there's always that insecurity in a relationship of separateness. Always wondering, am I good enough? Am I doing all right? Do I really love God? Do I really care? Am I being sincere? Right? And so that's one aspect. The other one is we build resentments. If this divine notion of God is wanting you to behave differently than you want to, making you want, asking you to renounce, or to to go to church or to go to temple, and you're like, I want to, right? Then that becomes a sorrow. And so any separation from the divine is a source of deep sorrow, depending on your awareness of it, your awareness of what it is that you're missing, of what it is that you're not experiencing, right? And we talked about why that's a big danger in this world, because this world is relative and you can get used to anything. So you can become a terribly wicked person and become completely unaware of it because it's just your normal, right? And slowly, slowly, your friends have kind of aligned. The ones that who were saintly have left you long ago, right? And the new company that's been attracted to you has kind of taken their places. And slowly, slowly, we become worldly, right? Slowly, slowly, we lose touch with our nature of Satchitananda, of our nature of pure love, of being the divine, being in union, in harmony with God, which is the highest that we can do when we still believe ourselves to be a body mind. But we continue on with that belief, all right, trying to harmonize, trying to become aware of God, trying to fall in love with God. And that's the process through which ego is slowly dissolved, right? And it takes, who knows how long. There's not a prescribed amount of time that it takes. But Thakur does say it's your sincerity and earnestness that make it happen, right? And you can test your sincerity and earnestness by your renunciation of your vices, right? When you say no to your vices, is it a real no, right? Are you unified inside? It's like, no, that's not going to happen. If you can say a no like that, then it removes the thoughts of your vice from your mind, and then it's no struggle at all. But when you're not sincere, when you're not unified, right, in your no, there's a part of you that's like, oh God, I please don't let this happen. I've been trying this for so long. There's always a sense of victimhood around it somewhere, because then we don't feel guilty. If we're a victim, we genuinely tried real hard, but I fell anyway, right? If I always tell myself, now mind you, I'm still working on these things significantly myself. This is how I know about them. This is how I can talk about them. I just look inside and I see it. It's like this whole problem of being divided in our own kingdom within our own heart. And you can always tell, right? Because there's no need for you to wrestle with something you don't want to do. If you say no and you mean it, the mind won't entertain it. It won't keep bringing it back. But if there's a smidgen of you in there that's like, no, no, I shouldn't do that. No, I shouldn't do that. There's just an edge there where you're not giving an absolute no. When you go to battle, right? When you're sitting there trying not to be lusty or trying not to eat that piece of cake, that's always the safe one to talk about, the piece of cake or the pizza, right? If you're saying no to it, but you don't mean it, right? What are some signs of not meaning it? Well, you leave the pizza on the counter instead of putting it in its package and putting it back in the fridge or the freezer. But there's little signs like that. If you go to battle, I'm convinced that the mind takes you into battle for only one reason, and that is to lose, right? But you go into battle so that you can fight long enough to feel like you've done a good job of resisting. I lasted longer than I've ever lasted before, right? But then you eat the piece of cake. But I ate the piece of cake because I really tried and I worked so hard. And, in your mind, the argument turns you into victim. I did the very best I could. I was just overcome and I ate the cake, right? Instead of being honest, saying, I didn't really say no to it. I didn't have a grand renunciation. I wanted the cake. And so I fought long enough to feel good about it. And I ate the cake. And now I'm real sorry, right? So you're the toddler. with the cupcake stain around your mouth. All right, so I'm not saying that to bring up some sense of guilt or some sense of terrible thing, but what I am saying is that if you're in that situation, it's better to admit that you want the cake and that you're not fighting it hard, and you take it to the Lord and you sit there with the Lord with awareness and eat that piece of cake. And if you do that, then you will see clearly all of the ramifications of it. As long as you keep the presence of God and you've been honest about your desire and you go, then you can discern properly because you're being honest. You can say, wow, that piece of cake is not all that satisfying. Now that I've had one mouthful of it, I could throw the rest away with no trouble at all. Right? And then you sit and you eat the whole cake and you sit and you experience eating the cake. And you think, look, I really compromised myself for this experience. Was it worth it? Right? And then when the piece of cake is done, you're like, wow, look, the effect of my compromise stays in my heart, but the benefit of the cake is gone. Wow, that's tough to live with, right? And so we discern because we're being honest and we can see clearly we're not lying and pretending at that point. And that's how we can work through these things, that we learn to let go of them by understanding the truth of the reality of them. That it cannot give you what it promises, it does not last, right? And that you would have been happier with victory than you were with compromise. And if you stay present and stay honest like that, because you can do that in grace. You don't have to hide your things from God. You can't hide your things from God. God is the one who's watching your mind at this moment. Your ego put a name on him or her and said it's you, but it's God. It's God who's watching the mind. You're just confused about that at this point. And so anything that you're engaged with, God's not somewhere else busy with someone else, not seeing. God is you. He is the witness of everything within you, right? And that's the beauty of that. And so keep it honest, keep it level, keep it real, and discern carefully, right? And be careful because the mind knows how to fool you because it's you fooling your own self. In comparison to this, all other sorrows seem to be a sort of pretense. Certainly, he who is aware and experiences not only what he is, but what he is can sorrow in earnest. But he who has no experience of this sorrow, let him begin to make sorrow, because he is not yet experienced in perfect sorrow. This sorrow and the possession of it purifies a man's soul, not only of sin, but also of the punishment that he has deserved because of his sin. Right? So he's to kind of take the loaded words out here for those traumatized souls, myself included. He's talking about karma here, right? It's really, we can just talk about it as karma. And he's saying, if you don't have that longing for God, start, right? So instead of saying sorrow, which, brings in the ideas of pity and self-whatevers, we're going to use a different word, and that's longing, like what Thakur talks about. That longing, that pain of separation, like, oh man, I want the embrace of my beloved. God, I wish that I could just sit here and relax and see you and be completely surrounded by you. I wish that I could have that experience of ecstasy of what it is to be in your presence, fully aware. All right. And so we try through discernment to awaken that longing, to return to our pure nature, to return to our harmony with the divine, where we are aware of our immortality. We are aware of our purity. We are aware of our oneness with God. And we let go of the individual stories of our ego that were the knowledge of good and evil that we got from the fruit of eating ego, of feeding our ego, nourishing our ego, and becoming so separate. So he says this sorrow or this longing for God purifies a man's soul, right? It's like mother, it's where you're calling out to God. Mother says, if you repeat the name of God, if you were supposed to have a sword driven through your chest, she says, at most you'll get a pinprick, right? So this purification of repeating the name of God takes us out of danger, right? takes us out of danger because it brings us closer to God, and it purifies us of this separateness, this idea of separateness. And when we start losing that feeling of separateness, we stop planning to be separate, right? And we start basically manifesting our nature, right? We start acting in accordance with who we are spontaneously, because we're finally quieting the mind, moving out of mind and moving into the heart, and finding God there, finding our beloved there. And in the love that relationship is producing within the heart, then that is eventually where we start acting from. We're full of love. We're feeling that love. We feel that fullness inside. And so we're naturally kind. We naturally are sharing it because it's what's in us. It's what we're experiencing. We're not worried about our problems. We're not worried about our selfish plans and got our eyes on ourselves. When you're in that state of oneness, or in that state of surrender with God, or state of company of God, depending on what level you're in, whether it's just prayer at the time. But either way, just that awareness of God and the relationship that you are at, wherever it is, at that level, is going to affect the way you are in the world. And in its extreme, when that oneness is seen, it's spontaneous. You spontaneously do what Jesus would do. You spontaneously do what Ramakrishna would do. You spontaneously act as Holy Mother would act. Why? Because that is whose nature you carry within you. That is the nature that is trying to express through you. And to the degree that you don't suffer, to that degree you're being successful in following that nature. To the degree that you suffer, to that degree you're not being true to your nature within you. You're not acting from the heart, from love or wisdom. You're acting from a story of hunger or need in the mind, right? So this sorrow and the possession of it purifies a man's soul, not only of sin, but also of the punishment that he has deserved because of that sin. So it removes karma. That's what he's saying, right? So by drawing close to the divine through this practice of japam, or repeating the name of God, we purify ourselves internally and lessen our insistence on evil. Lessens our insistence on evil, because now we've got a notion, I'm not this body, so I don't need to go out and find pleasures for it. I don't need to go out and get upset when somebody's taking something that could have been pleasant for me, all like that. So little by little, the karma evens out. We come to realize I'm not the mind. And when you know that for sure, not just as a statement or philosophy, but when you know that you're not the mind, at that point, your karma loses its sway over you, right? You're free at that point. It thus makes it possible for the soul to receive that joy, which takes away all of a man's awareness and experience of his own being, aka samadhi, right? That time when somebody is fully aware of their union with God, it thus makes it possible for the soul to receive that joy, which takes away all of a man's awareness, or a person's awareness and experience of their own being, right? You don't have a sense of separateness. You are not aware of being separate from the divine. That oneness is your reality. This sorrow, as if we understand it right, is full of holy desires, right? Holy desires would be basically the inspirations of Satchit Ananda, right? And so all of your actions are spontaneous. They're not born of thinking, not born of story. They're born of being, right? And you're not being a Swami C or being a person. You are simply being. You are radiating the nature of your divine self, which radiates in every direction equally, uncaused, unconditioned, right? Just a continual expression of the overflowing love that is your divine nature. Otherwise, in this life, a man could never abide it or bear it. For unless a man were to be sustained in some way, with some consolation in the true performance of this exercise, he would not be able to bear the pain which he has from the awareness and experience of his own being, right? That's the pain that you get from the awareness and experience of being separate from God when you have your own being separate from the beloved. For often he desires to have a true awareness and experience of God in purity of spirit, as far as this is possible in this life. And as often he feels that he cannot, because he always finds that his awareness and experience are in a sense occupied and filled with this foul and fetid lump of himself. There's another t-shirt. Fetid lump. Yeah, so here he's making, I love how he's doing it, or in his writing here, because he's making it very, very clear what the real situation is. Your separation from God is the cause of all of your suffering, not all of the little situations and stories and events that have happened that have caused suffering. That's what we blame it on. We think, oh, I need to go out and drink more because when I came home, I was miserable, right? Because we're starting from a sense of separation, a sense of body-mind. And so we look for solutions that are body-mind oriented. And you're suffering terribly. The reason you're not aware of it, again, is what we started with. This world is a relative world, right? You jump in a freezing cold swimming pool and you're like, oh my God, it's freezing cold in here. But if you stay in there, it becomes fine, right? You accept it. The body adjusts. Everything comes down to that level. And so in our lives, it's the same way. If you start wickedness, the first time you do it, it'll be a big shock. If you keep doing it, eventually you're going to accept it as a part of yourself. And you won't feel so inclined to say no or to renounce. And then you start telling little stories that allow you to have your vices. Oh, it's not that bad. I only have one. I only do it once a week. I never do it more than 9 times in a year. Whatever it is, if you don't renounce and you don't get it out, it's going to settle in as being okay. You're going to adjust your level of consciousness down to that level, and it will seem and feel fine, unless you're hanging out in holy company or reading good scripture or sitting in the presence doing your practice. Those are the things that remind you of the beauty of what you are and don't let you settle with the delusions of what you think you are, right? And so this is what he's warning us about here. And because this lump must always be hated and despised and forsaken, if a man would be God's perfect disciple and taught by him on the mountain of perfection, he is nearly out of his mind with sorrow, right? Again, so this lump must always be hated and despised and forsaken. Right? So it's not yourself that you should hate, forsake, and despise. It's your delusions, right? This is why it's important to not have a fond regard toward your vices, right? Don't think of them as being pleasant things that you've allowed yourself to enjoy. They are blinders that you've put on your mind that will cause you to walk off a cliff. And he's trying to bring you to that level of understanding. So he's using these very strong words, that we must always hate, despise, push away, renounce, kill, all of these unhelpful behaviors of ourselves, within ourselves, right? And I'm always very careful about these because, again, you only read this and feel like you should despise and hate yourself because we haven't experienced not being attached to body mind. And so we think it's all one package, and then we feel guilty, and then we think that we're supposed to feel guilty, and then we develop self-hatred, and we feel self-righteous in our self-hatred because we're being humble, with a big quote. But that is all incorrect. None of that's healthy, and none of that will set you free. That will cause you suffering and increase your bondage, right? Because you cannot accept grace in that state. You simply can't, because you just can't believe it, right? That's why you're hating yourself. And so as opposed to this, it's like we do try and be honest and straightforward with where we are. We keep our eyes on pure love, on God, right? Constantly. To remember this is what I am, this is what I am, this is what I am. And by loving that, you automatically renounce this. And so that is a much more effective way. Don't put your eyes on this fetid lump and get down and angry and full of self-hatred and all that stuff. That is a path, and that is what he's pointing at. It doesn't work, though. What works is keeping your eyes on God and contemplating the divine and becoming intimately aware of what the nature of an unconditioned love is, so that you will normally walk away from the lower self. You won't be deluded into thinking, wow, what I'd really like is a big party and a lot of distraction. And you start appreciating a nice, quiet night at home with some spiritual music playing in the background and the thought of God there, and nothing else really needs to be done. You just are at peace to be in the presence, right? All right, so because this lump must always be hated and despised and forsaken, right? So hated, which means you don't love it, don't warm your heart toward it. Despised mean don't try and decorate it as being just a cute little habit that you just do every now and then, and it's a special thing between God and I. He doesn't mind, right? And forsaken, which means just left alone, never picked up. So that's the proper attitude to have toward your delusion, right? When you're lower self. And he says, if a man would be God's perfect disciple and be taught by him on the mountain of perfection, he's nearly out of his mind with sorrow at our inability to be there, at our inability to touch that. So much so that he weeps and wails and strives with himself, denounces and heaps curses upon himself. Right? We have a perfect example of that with Ramakrishna. You know, it said there's a scene in the gospel where Ramakrishna, it's the end of the day, and God and Ramakrishna has been thinking about his day spiritually. Did I love God? How was my day? Did I move toward God? And he gets so upset that he's writhing in the dirt, banging his head on the ground, shoving his face in the dirt, and saying to Mother, Mother, another day has been lived in vain. I still have not seen you, have still not shown yourself to me. Please, Mother, please, Mother. And he's weeping, and throwing dirt over his head. I mean, it's a very intense scene, something completely out of the ordinary for you and I to experience. He's sitting there throwing dust in the air, saying, don't let my life pass in vain. Please reveal yourself to me. Please, please. So he saw that every day at the end of the day, I haven't realized God yet, right? And that pain of him, that intensity, that's what he's pointing at here. That's what our monk is pointing at here. A pure soul being separated from God is in an intense state of suffering. And it's that suffering that purifies them and allows them to draw near. Right? Allows them to renounce, allows them to let go of all the things that are causing that separation or the illusion of that separation. Right? In a word, it seems to him that this burden of himself, which he carries, is so heavy that he does not care what happens to him as long as God is pleased. Right? And that's what we're talking about. That's where you keep your mind. You don't keep your mind on your suffering. You acknowledge it. Right? But you don't bury yourself in it. You don't identify with it because you're suffering from things that are not you. You're not suffering from being you, right? You're suffering because you've identified with body, because you've identified with mind, and that has caused you to think of serving body and mind, whether it's through lust and greed or name and fame or just selfishness, right? It's going to be based on those things. And so basically, as he's saying here, to come out of this self-hatred, he said, in a word, it seems to him that this burden of himself, this burden of being separate from God, this burden of living like a body mind, which he carries is so heavy, right? Because through discernment, you've seen how much of a price you've paid for your vices. You see how much love has been denied you because you could not become aware of it, because your mind would not let you accept it because of your karma. It's like you give yourself what you deserve. But when you are no longer keeping your eyes on those vices and no longer pursuing them, right? You give them up. You don't care what happens to your separate body anymore because you're not the body. You don't care what happens to your separate mind anymore because you're not the mind. He says you don't care what happens to you as long as God is pleased, right? Your only goal in that realization is to stay in harmony. Because the other way of saying it is not that God is pleased, but that I'm in harmony with my nature. Another way of saying it, only because I know that when my mind is constantly confronted with having to please God all the time, eventually my ego gets provoked. It's like, hey, what about me? Right? So at some point you have to understand the unity. You have to understand that you're not giving up your life in order to just be obedient to God because he's bigger and stronger, which is a lot of times what we feel, right? That's not the case. This is your lover who has treated you perfectly, right? And your giving up is your giving up wrong thinking, giving up things that in their essence have hurt you and have left you hungry every time, have taken you all the way down to the curb and still not delivered to you what you were looking for in them. Right? And so this is that freedom when we finally hit the bottom, or we finally hit that space where we're like, I'm done. I'm not doing that again. I'm finished. Right? And then we only care about that one thing, finding that harmony and maintaining that harmony with ourself, our highest nature, or God, our beloved. At the same time, and in all this sorrow, he has no desire not to be, right? Because that would be the devil's madness and contempt for God, right? So we don't look at and this does become a temptation. I hate to say, not necessarily suicide in that sense, but this longing for peace can often be translated in somebody. I just want this to end. I just want to get out of here. I can't do this. I can't do this anymore. It goes into a despair, right? And that is not. You're taking a wrong turn. And so he's telling you here, be careful, right? That in all this sorrow that you have no desire to not be, right? That you're not going to wipe yourself out. That's not necessary, and it's not the solution. The solution is surrender and patience, right? And that surrender and that patience will once again spark the love in the heart. And you'll feel that positivity, that potential of your divinity. Rather, he is very glad to be, right? You've got an opportunity to sit. I've often say one of the quickest ways to experience your own bliss that's native to you is to sit and contemplate your isness. Sit and try and figure out, what does it mean to exist? And it is a marvelous mystery that you will not be able to answer, but as you become aware of your awareness, which is what that question does, right? What is it? What is my existence? That forces you to put your awareness on your awareness, the awareness of being. And there's a great deal of love that manifests simply through that exercise, right? And so if you are in a state of depression or a state of, I just want to get out of here, lay that aside, right? And just contemplate for a moment, just sit in a quiet place and see what does it mean to exist? I'm right here. Let me experience my existence at this moment. And you will find joy in it. You'll find potential in it. You'll find an infinity of possibility in it. It is God, and it's amazing. Every soul must possess and experience in itself this sorrow and this desire, either in this way or in another way, as God will grant in the teaching of his spiritual disciples, according to his good pleasure and their corresponding capacity, in body and in soul, in degree and disposition, before they can be perfectly united to God in perfect charity, insofar as this union can be possessed in this life, if God will grant it. Right? And so as he's talking there, you see that he's not saying it's going to happen necessarily, right? Because there's this whole notion that if if Mother wanted the game to be over, right? We would all realize God immediately. But the fact that Mother has 1 in a million realizing God every so often, that means there's something to being here. There's something in the play that's important to the divine that you not just be released, right? And so we're told to practice and find your contentment in your own self, in being. Don't go longing for a change of something in the future. Strive to enjoy God in the moment. That's the point of practice. Strive to enjoy God in the moment. Not needing anything, not thinking I'm doing this to lay up some sort of bank account for a future. When I get enough cash, I'll be able to pull it all out and go buy some enlightenment, right? And then life will be good. No, life is good right now. Life is perfect right now. Life is beautiful right now. And it's your job to sit in patience and to try out all the different perspectives internally until you find the divine perspective, which will allow you to experience and see the perfection of the moment, the love of God. And you come to understand the impossibility of God separating from you. You understand there was no way that God could ever have left you. You would have simply ceased to be, but you haven't. And so the promise remains, the commitment remains, the hope remains for your freedom. So all of this he's laying out there. All right, we'll jump into chapter 45. We probably won't get through it, but we get a good start. Chapter 45, a detailed explanation of certain illusions that can occur during this exercise. Okay, so these are the potentials of our ignorance. Let me tell you something else. During this exercise, it is very easy for a young disciple to be deceived who is not yet accustomed to spiritual exercises and is a little experienced in them. Unless he is aware of this from the start and has the grace to stop and submit himself to spiritual direction, it is likely that his bodily strength will be seriously damaged, that he will become the victim of a spiritual illusion. All this is due to pride and sensuality and false reasoning. Okay, so this is what we were talking about, the relative world. You know, that if we're not watchful, we're not alert, we're not doing, we don't have a regular daily strong practice. I don't emphasize that enough. It is a disaster. That's a good word. It is a disaster for a spiritual seeker to not have a strong, regular spiritual practice, right? It is a disaster because because you are susceptible to these three things that he's listing right here. If you don't have that daily strong practice, because every day you're practicing worldliness, right? For the periods of time that you're not asleep in a bed, you are practicing worldliness. You are acting as a body. You are nurturing that body. You're acting from a mind. You're nurturing that mind. You're constantly emphasizing that I am a body and I am a mind, because you're living in a world where everybody believes themselves to be a body-mind. And so that's going to be the natural or the standard state of being if you have no practice, if you're not exposing yourself to your inner world, right? Getting away from all the sensations of the changing world, which define us in so many ways, and finding that unbounded self within, right? Because if you're not doing that practice, because you live in a relative world, these three things, your pride, right, of not wanting to be wrong, not wanting to be weak, not wanting to be unknowing, right? Pride, sensuality, a constant thought of the pleasures of the body. I like these foods. I like these sensations. I like these images. I like these places, right? Sensuality means we start living to satisfy our senses. We start living for comfort. We start living for pleasure, right? and false reasoning. We come up with excuses of why we're not doing what we know we should be doing, right? We start making excuses and start coming up with reasonings of why it's not so bad, right? Why it's not so bad. And so those are the dangers. And so the solution to this, stay in the presence as often and as deeply as possible. Call it practice, or call it love of God, or call it being, however you want to phrase it. But make a good portion of your day. The ideal is your whole day. But we all have this idea that if we're practicing, we can't be doing anything else. But in time, we learn that life is practice, right? And we don't have to cordon off just an hour in the morning and an hour in the evening. We still do those. But when we get up from our meditations in the morning, it's not over. We're still holding that space and nurturing that space within ourselves for the whole day, so that these constant slow drip of the water of worldliness that we're exposed to all day, every day, so that doesn't create a canyon right through the center of our heart, right? So we want to be in the presence of God as much as we can. So during this exercise, it's very easy for a young disciple to be deceived, who is not yet accustomed to spiritual exercises, who doesn't have a strong practice, right? It's easy for us to be deceived if we're in that state. Who is not yet accustomed to spiritual exercises and is a little experienced in them. Unless he is aware of this from the start and has the grace to stop and submit himself to spiritual direction, it is likely that his bodily strength will be seriously damaged, right? He's going to do less and less over time, because that's what happens. If you're paying attention to the body, being sensual in your thinking, arranging your life around comfort and the things that you enjoy, then little by little, you're going to become a victim of spiritual illusion, right? Because you will make the justifications for those things and tell the stories that give you permission to do those things, right? And if that becomes the case, you won't be reaping much bliss in your practice. And so in some time, you'll give up on it. That's not giving me anything. Why am I wasting my time doing this all the time? It's going nowhere. And so we minimize it, or we go look for an easier practice, right? Or a less demanding practice, right? God, it's so terrible. It's so terrible that I know so much about this. It's the thing, sitting here, literally, mother sitting there with her arms crossed, just looking at me like, you're getting it. You're getting it. Because I'm learning in the same way that we're all learning. We read these words, we're like, wow, time to sharpen up, right? Time to sharpen up. And that's the feeling every time you go to the scriptures. And it's always true. And you've always got enough grace to start again. And so you do. That's the point of spiritual company and of Holy Scripture and of our practice. He will become the victim of a spiritual illusion, and all this is due to pride, sensuality, and false reasoning. All right, so we'll stop there today and pick up there next week.